Hello and welcome back to the West Ham Breakdown with me, Jack Elderton, and my mate Cal. I'm back hosting. And the only reason I'm doing that, because Cal's been doing such a smashing job, is because we've made a signing. It's finally happened. And I've got to ask a bunch of questions to Cal, and Cal's got to answer them. So look, we talked a little bit about this on Extra Time last week, but it's coming to the main pod this week. It's Elhaji Malick Diouf, our new left wing back.
At last, we are finally spending some money in the... well, I nearly called him a fullback, but he is a wing-back, as you've said, and as has been stated, I believe, by X, as a left wing-back or left-wing option, which is quite exciting.
Cal, I never thought I'd see the day. Left-backs, money?
I know.
What's happening
I know.
here?
I thought we were getting the Aaron Cresswell contract extension, and now we're dropping almost 30 million euros on a left wing-back. But, yeah, I mean, smart money, to be honest, which some people might think sounds crazy, but predominantly because we haven't actually spent that much on defenders for a long time in those areas, so it actually just feels alien. But yeah, I mean, we're going to spend the whole pod talking about how good or bad this guy is, but right off the bat, super excited. One of the most sought after sort of under 21 wing-backs in world football coming into this summer. Liverpool were looking at him. Obviously, they've ended up with Milos Kerkez, the sort of Prem proven option. But this kind of smacks of a signing that Bournemouth could quite easily have gone for to replace Kerkez had they the option to play a wing-back system. But obviously, Iraola, you need someone that's a bit more well-versed in a back four, which Diouf, for all of his strengths, is not yet.
Yeah, so in the sort of pantheon of West Ham left-back signings, we've got sort of Joey O'Brien, George McCartney returns again, Razvan Rats, Pablo Armero, obviously Aaron Cresswell's in there as well, all the way through to, Patrice Evra, Arthur Masuaku, of course.
Rita Ilunga, he was a left-back.
We're going way back now. We're going too far back. It's quite exciting, isn't it? It's like the first time that we've really... In a while, I think Cresswell was kind of a similar vibe, but it's the first time since that we've really gone for someone young who is really impressive and has impressed a lot of people across the last year. Did he come onto your radar? I'm interested. Did he come onto your radar when he arrived at Slavia, or had you spotted him at all before? Because he seems to have had this really rapid rise from almost total obscurity through Tromsø to Slavia Prague, and Slavia Prague seems like another really good example of their recruitment, which is going very well at the moment.
Incredibly well, yeah. So he actually had been on my radar for a couple of seasons since, when he was at Tromsø, but not because I knew a lot about him, just because I have a sort of ping set up that when a player under a certain age plays X number of senior minutes, it's worth me going and having a look, because anyone at any level that is playing in a senior league when they're under 18 for an extended period of time must be worth going to check out. And it might just be that they're good enough for the level, but I think upon investigation it was very clear that Diouf had all of the sort of physical profile to be able to step up through the leagues as well. He's tall, he's quick, etc, etc, etc. And then when he arrived at Slavia and started contributing and sort of carried on that level of performance, I think that was when I started to really be like, okay, maybe this guy could be an option. And then this season just gone, he just exploded really in terms of adding everything to his game that I sort of wanted to see. I mean, goal scoring is probably the standout thing when people go and look at his numbers, which I'm sure everyone will. But that was something that he'd been doing at Tromsø. He kind of was this goal scoring, very technically gifted player. It was more the defensive side of things that I wanted to see how he handled it. Not just in the Czech League, because obviously that's not a super, super high level, but getting experience in the Champions League, getting experience in the Europa League, whether he'd be able to demand the same number of minutes in those more competitive competitions. And he did. He was a nailed-on starter, and I think you can see from the outpouring of love for him from Slavia fans, coaches, players in his departure, it clearly feels like everyone that has played with him is in agreement that he's ready for this next step. I don't think anything that I've seen suggests that he's not, whether that, like I say, that's fans or his teammates, which can only be a really exciting thing for us as well, because fellow professionals are recognising that this guy is ready to go to the top.
Yeah, I think it's always a very exciting thing. If you think back to when we sold Declan Rice, there was a similar vibe around it. Not for everyone, I understand that, but there was definitely a similar vibe from the club, which was let's thank this guy. He's done an incredible job for us, but he's kind of gone beyond us now. And that tends to make you think someone's very good if the atmosphere around the place when they leave is just everyone's really pleased that they've made that next step, or everyone's really chuffed to see them making that next step. Like I say, again, it's different for fans, and this is particularly impressive to see him get that reception with fans whilst he's leaving the club at Slavia. But to have that internally from coaches and players, like you say, is always a good sign that people tend to really rate him. I wonder, and this is just an aside, but I wonder if he came onto our radar at all, because for a while there was talk about Ismail Jakobs. As a sort of flying wing back option, was at Monaco. I think he went to Galatasaray on loan. I'm not sure exactly whether he made that permanent or not, but he was the starting left back, was in and around starting spot for Senegal at that time, and then he's been usurped, hasn't he, by Diouf. And I wonder if that was the moment which he kind of came onto the West Ham radar, because we were looking so closely at Jakobs.
Probably. I would be amazed if there wasn't something in that. It was reported at the time that I think at least our scouts, I don't think Potter, but certainly our scouts were at that England-Senegal game that happened a few months back. It might not even be a few months. It might be 1 month.
It feels like a few months,
yeah,
does it?
It certainly does with everything that's been going on. But yeah, I mean, there was clips going around before West Ham were even linked after the game of those sort of montages of like Elhaji Malick Diouf brackets away versus England, and it's like, okay, if someone has felt the need to go and clip up all of his actions in an international friendly, there must be something to it. And yeah, I think I've watched a lot of him in prep for this, and also beforehand because of the work we do on the transfer stuff, which, yeah, to be fair, if anyone wants to learn more about left wing backs, which does feel a little redundant now that we have signed one, but we were doing a lot of work and they just beat us to it, and I'm not going to be angry about West Ham signing anyone, because it's really exciting and I'm pleased with it, but yeah, we did scout a lot of left wing backs, and yeah, he came out very highly. I won't say exactly where, because you need to go and watch it, but yeah, if you want to see us discuss all of the options that we had on our shortlist, then go and join the Patreon at patreon.com/analyticsunited, where Jack and Darcy have done some fantastic work. But yeah, we were all very familiar with him, but yeah, the fact that people then sort of cottoned on because he was broadcast on ITV and everyone was like, whoa, who is this lad? I'm moved. Some of those balls into the box, I think, yeah, if they had, I mean, Fulkrug, we know what he can be like with those sort of instinctive number 9 runs in the box, as well as all his other stuff. But yeah, I can see that being quite a nice combination.
Do you think that's the first strength that we should discuss, his ability when whipping the ball in? Because obviously you've mentioned Fulkrug, but there is a man with a magnetic cranium that is in our midfield that might benefit from these balls in as well. Yeah,
I mean, I hadn't even thought about that prospect, probably because in my planning I'm still curious about whether Souček is in the starting 11 nailed on or not. But yeah, now that you've brought in someone who can deliver a ball into the box quite as well as Diouf does, then it does certainly start to raise questions, particularly if you think as well with the nature of Souček's runs, sort of late arriving, box crashing, back post. If you've got Diouf crossing from a little bit deeper, sort of before the defensive even managed to sort of anticipate that sort of manoeuvre, in the same way that Cresswell used to do, actually, in terms of rolling the ball out of his feet rather than sort of bursting on. Diouf can do that. The flip side is that Diouf can actually do all of the other stuff that Cresswell sort of couldn't, certainly towards the back end of his career. So there's an added element of dynamism there. But yeah, for sure, I mean, the notion of having Fulkrug attacking the box and then Souček peeling in off the back of him, because the centre-back is obviously going to have to follow Fulkrug anyway because of the threat that he presents, is particularly exciting. But his delivery is fantastic, and I think that was probably the main thing, actually, that people that did watch that England game picked up on. There was consistent supply of really good deliveries into the box, like right into the middle of the penalty box towards the 6-yard. Those horrible ones that keepers don't really know whether to come for or not, because
between the centre backs and the goalkeeper, and also exactly somehow between the two centre backs, it's such a difficult zone to hit, and yet he. You know, I put it in our article that's going to be coming out on the West Ham website discussing him. He kind of hits them. He hits them first time like it's a free kick. You know how Cresswell used to sort of knock the ball out of his feet? He stopped, knocked the ball out of his feet, and then whip it in because he wanted those free kick-like conditions.
Yeah.
Diouf somehow manages to do that on the through ball, so that the ball is rolling down his side as that sort of diagonal through ball from a midfielder, and he will just run onto it. First time without that need. We always had that pause with Cresswell where the centre-backs were able to kind of prepare themselves and the goalkeeper could get ready. Diouf just whips it straight away. There's no opportunity for anyone to prepare. And the pace he gets on it makes it a lot easier, I think, for a forward.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it takes a lot of the stress away from the forward because they don't have to worry as much. They obviously still have to worry about timing of the leap and making sure you're sort of arriving to meet the ball at the right time. But when, as you say, you've put so much pace on the delivery, you can almost afford to arrive a tiny bit late, because as long as it bounces off your head in the general direction of the goal, it's probably going to be moving at quite some speed. But yeah, I'm glad you picked that up. I sort of was describing it to a friend the other day when he'd first been linked, and sort of they were asking, "Oh, do you know much about him?" I was, "Yes, I'm very excited." But that specific type of delivery I described is like, you know, when you play. Obviously, I've never played at a particularly high level. I did used to play as a kid, but those moments where you'd sort of hit a few dead crosses, but one time you'll hit it perfectly first time, and it's like 1 in every 50. But those moments when the connection and the sort of momentum of the ball just meet perfectly to mean that you've whipped in an absolute peach.
Yeah, I never knew that one personally.
Yeah, mainly by luck. Well, I played right mid, so it happened quite a bit that I would get in those positions, but then generally I was crap, so it never actually went where I wanted it. But on the occasion, it was actually probably more so when I was rushed and I didn't have the time, so I was like, right, yep. I need to just pump this into the box, because if I take a touch, I'm going to fall over my own feet or get tackled. But with Diouf, it's like, no, hard-coded. I've got the skill and quality to execute that level of delivery and pace 9 times out of 10, which is really quite something, because it's not something that we've had, certainly on that left side, for a long time. As you say, Cresswell operated in a slightly different way, and then Emerson, I think, a completely different player altogether, really. Super good in terms of his combination, but never really felt like he had a crazy sort of attacking final third presence.
No, I mean, always looking to keep the ball on the deck, and often a little bit nosebleedy when he got inside the box, or around the box. Much better in second phase. Gotta say, one of the best left backs we've had in second phase. And if you're thinking, what am I on about? I mean, moving the ball from the middle third to the final third. He was very, very good at that, particularly in combination with Paquetá when Paquetá was on the left. Sort of had a bit of a telepathic relationship, always knew where to be to receive a pass in space and then drive with the ball. But yeah, like you say, never really gave that final third upside. Really important thing to speak about next, I think, is if he's very good at delivering on the left-hand side when he receives, he's also very, very useful when the ball's on the other side of the pitch and the right wing back or the right wing is delivering across. He's almost, I mean, based on, if you just looked at goals and assists and that was your sort of surface level analysis, he's almost better when the ball's on the other side of the pitch, because he gets into such brilliant positions. And I think the thing that I like the most about him there, and I'll let you pick up on this, is the patience. He holds the width really well to stretch things, to create more space for the forwards and make it more difficult for the centre-backs. And then he's so patient with just knowing to wait and wait and wait and wait. And then a couple of goals where he waits for the fullback that he's up against or the wing back that he's up against to then check to look at the ball again. And at the precise moment that player turns their head, he just goes from 0 to 100 so quickly and just sprints into the box. And no one's able to pick him up because the player that's meant to be marking him isn't looking. He kind of knows to wait until that moment and then creates chaos.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the main reasons I would assume that Potter has been looking at him. If you think of sort of how Potter's tactics tend to function, or when they functioned at their best at Brighton, it was stretch the pitch, build up down one side of the pitch. Wan-Bissaka makes a run. Wan-Bissaka cuts it back to Bowen on the edge of the box, and Bowen either could shoot if the defence sit off, but what often happens, and I think we saw it happen really early on actually in Potter's arrival here, I think it was against Villa and Chelsea, it was a sort of tried and tested sort of move that was happening a lot, was you'd cut it back and then rather than shot, you'd then cross it to the back post. And I think if you can stretch the pitch in the way that Malik Diouf does, and then have him arrive on the end of those balls toward the back post where there's no defender that's been able to pick him up because A, as you say, he's timed his run so well, but also B, because he's incredibly fast off the mark. So he's going to beat you if you're sort of stuck or you having to turn to then track him. He's going to be running at it without any need to turn. So he's going to beat you.
It's like Rashford versus Craymer.
Yes.
Remember that goal?
Yeah.
They just can't adjust fast enough, and someone's running at such speed that they just get over the top of you very easily.
Yeah, and then you think, okay, perfect example, Rashford versus Craymer, but in that scenario, Rashford is the attacker, right? Whereas this is our wing back. So then what is the attacker in the lineup doing? Well, that's great, because it means he can go and do all sorts of things and cause more damage in the box because we've got someone that can commit without us sort of having to lose an attacker out of the situation. So yeah, really exciting. I think on the flip side as well, I know we're talking about 3 different things that relate to wide areas now, which for a wing back, I suppose, is not surprising, but it's sort of, he's an incredibly effective box crasher, but at the other end of the pitch, this means that he's also incredibly effective at when he's in the right position, which is a slight caveat, but at defending the back post. I mean, in terms of aerial success rate, he's one of the best performing wing-backs in both the Europa League, but also in the Czech League in terms of winning duels in the air. I think he's at 55%, which for a fullback is great. 6 foot, really sort of strong, 1v1 frame, which is a weird way to describe it, but it's sort of that frame that he can stand you up in the duel and he can go shoulder to shoulder with a runner if he's backpedaling, but also then if a ball comes into the back post, he can contest. And if you think about who he's going to be going up against, assuming the centre-backs have got the strikers covered, it's probably going to be a winger, which if he's 6 foot, he's probably going to be a similar size, if not bigger, than a lot of the Premier League wingers that you might be marking. So I think that's a real asset for us as well, particularly when you think about, I mean, things that have happened in previous seasons. Cresswell, the perfect example, right? So good at so many things. Defending the back post, not something I would necessarily want to hang my hat on. Ollie Scholes, really exciting young prospect that will be providing serious competition to Diouf, you would hope, throughout the season. But under the flight of the ball, I think it's probably been one of the standout weaknesses or areas for improvement, let's be more positive, for Scholes throughout the course of last season, was that when a ball came across, when the opposition switched it, he would quite often misjudge the flight of the ball, and it would mean that if sort of his side was underloaded, then there would be opportunity for them to get at Scholes because they've already gained that advantage. So I think we saw it towards the back end. Teams would actually target that quite a lot. They'd hit that switch out to Scholes' side.
Yeah, and something that's not just popped up in senior football, but something that I thought, at least when I watched the under-21s, was kind of obvious with him anyway. It's not something that is struggling with the adaptation to senior football. I think it's just generally anticipation of where to be under the high ball and just knowing how to move your body whilst tracking something that's in the air. I just think it's sometimes goes a bit wrong for him.
Yeah, and like we say, it's something he can learn. He's super young, but the fact that we've got a 20-year-old coming in for competition that is is expert at this, frankly, certainly at the level that we've seen him play at. How that translates to the Prem remains to be seen, of course, but really, really promising signs. And great for Scholes' development. Like you've got Scholes, who's good at so many things in this position, and you're bringing in competition for him, and that competition just so happens to be unbelievably good at what Scholes' biggest weakness is. Okay, brilliant. So he's going to be training with him week in, week out in the exact same position. So hopefully they can learn off each other, and that would be a real positive for Scholes' development, because Scholes isn't small either. He's not. This is one of my sort of gripes, I guess, with him, is that in those moments, like you say, he's got the frame to sort of make himself known, but he still somehow gets lost with the reading of it. So I'm just hoping there's some sort of learnings to be had there where Diouf can be like, nah, look what I do. I'm 6 foot. I'm going to go body check this man. You do the same and you'll be so much better for it. So I think that's really exciting as well.
Yeah, and we prefer to have that gripe than him be 5'6", right? Like,
exactly, yeah.
It's great to have that problem.
Yeah.
Look, we'll come back to competition between those two and more positives in a sec, but we'll take a little break first. So we just spoke about competition between Ollie Scholes and Malick Diouf, and if anyone's sitting here thinking, well, what if he's really good? Maybe Ollie Scholes will just not play and Diouf will take all of the minutes. I think we have got quite a nice natural route to reassess where Scholes is with AFCON. You spoke about that on ET, and Diouf is set to go away, right, in the middle of the season.
Yeah. I mean, like you say, if he's really good, which we all think he is, and he maintains that level of performance at Premier League level, then he will go to AFCON with Senegal, because he will start for Senegal, because he will be a well-performing left-back in the Premier League. So, yeah, he'll absolutely go. And then, like you say, it's it's like a lovely spell anyway for someone to step up. But I think when AFCON happens as well, it's like he'll have had the best part of half a season training with Diouf and providing competition for Diouf, and then Diouf will go away, and it's kind of like okay, now let's see what you've learned. Now let's see how much you've progressed, and then if it goes well in that period and Skull shows that he's progressed a lot and he's stepped on, then that's brilliant, because then Diouf comes back and he'll have to fight a bit harder than he was because Skulls has shown that he's stepped up and now there's even more competition. And if it doesn't, then Diouf comes back and he's obviously back into his starting berth and Skull starts again on that sort of learning curve. So yeah, it's a really nice sort of thing for us to have. I don't know how actively it will have been considered like we've considered it in that context when looking to bring him in, but it's certainly, they obviously will have considered AFCON, but whether they've sat and gone, well, we should bring this guy in because he's going to go to AFCON is probably not something that's going to...
No, they won't want him to go, They'd rather, I think we'd rather have him. But it's nice to get that opportunity to see where Scars is in that time, and also good if you're worried about injuries to think that, Wan-Bissaka can play both sides, and Wan-Bissaka was likely to go to AFCON since selecting for Congo. I don't think I have the same confidence in Congo going deep in the tournament based on their squad right now, whereas I look at Senegal as possible winners of AFCON, which obviously is a concern, right? We're probably going to lose both of our wing backs, our starting wing backs for AFCON, but hopefully, fingers crossed, and I'm sorry, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, to say this, but hopefully we get one of them back sooner rather than later. Be a bit of a nightmare if it's a Senegal versus
can you imagine?
DR Congo final, because that would be tough for us, especially given it starts a little bit earlier than usual. It's starting
December, right?
Yeah, 21st of December are due to start, and they'll go away probably about a week beforehand. So they'll miss most of the crunch period of fixtures, which means actually...
perfect.
Yeah, it means rather than it being maybe what it used to be, which was maybe 3 fixtures in January, you're probably looking at more towards 6, maybe even 7.
6, 7, yeah.
Depending on how long the lead time is. I don't know when they'll take them to build up for it, but it probably won't be the day before. So yeah, that is going to be difficult to deal with, and it will be interesting to see how Skull steps up in that time. And I think it's an interesting question to look forward to about what happens on the other side, at right wing back, because obviously there's no depth there after Soufal has left, and it's a risk to have both away for so long. Back to strengths, we've got a couple more to discuss, and then we're not just going to sit here and talk about all good things. We are going to come to some concerns that we have. I think the next thing to speak about probably is the stuff that we were mentioning with Emerson, where Emerson maybe didn't have quite so much in the final third. He was really, really good at helping us progress to the final third. We don't really lose that with bringing Diouf in, do we? Because he's still very skilled on that side of the game.
Yeah, 100%. I think as well, I think Emerson at times suffered because he's obviously more comfortable playing in a back four, and then we chuck him in at wing back, and I think the situations and the way that he's combining with players is different, whereas I think Diouf is a left wing back. He has played in this system before, and therefore is more sort of aware of what Potter's going to want from him. I think every time I've watched Diouf, I've been amazed at sort of what's the saying? Chalk on the boots in terms of how he sort of hugs that touchline, but is still able to link up with the central midfielders. Everyone sort of drifts over to him. He knows when to drift in. He knows when to go back to the centre back, and he also is very good at spotting the runs from those ahead of him. I think how that materialises in West Ham's system depends entirely on what the system looks like, because if he's being seen as a left wing back / left winger, then it's unlikely that there's going to be many occasions where someone's making a run down the line that he can thread in. However, he still does track incredibly well. In the Czech League for progressive passes, I think 11 per 90, which is freakish numbers, best in the league for his position. But you have to caveat
almost
that.
7 in the Europa League as well, which shows that it's not just something that he's doing because he's playing at a really high level and the team, Slavia are dominating most games. That's translated to playing against some really, really tough opposition as well.
Exactly that. I think it's probably more to do with the fact that he is one of, if not the most technically gifted player in his side, and therefore the manager will be building a system that puts things through him. Because why wouldn't you? And it's what most teams do, right? They find the most reliable, ball-comfortable players, and they become the hub of the team. That's no different for Diouf. And if you look at a team who, over the last few seasons, has maybe been overly reliant on one or two individuals to do a lot of that stuff, bringing in someone who can do it in a different area of the pitch is only going to be a real positive for us. So that is a real benefit. I think the other side is that, yes, he's great at that middle phase stuff. But if there isn't a pass on, then he's one of the best wing backs in terms of beating his man as well. So you've got a lovely bit of dynamism in that position.
Yeah, I mean, such a massive positive last season to have Wan-Bissaka being able to break pressure by just carrying himself and taking someone on, and then being able to, like I said, charge into the empty space, carrying forward. To know that we might be able to have similar qualities on the other side of the pitch, I think gives a real balance to the way in which we can build up. I think it allows for a little bit more focus for what Kilman might be able to do in build up, where I think we became a bit right side biased towards the end of last season. I also think that potentially helps Bowen, because he thrives when the ball builds on the other side of the pitch, because it opens the spaces that he wants to attack in. It makes his side underloaded. It means he's more threatening as a goal scorer. It was always the case under Moyes that we built left side. It made Bowen score loads of goals because he was able to arrive on the end of moves. So I think that's really nice to think. And I just again on the centre backs, Todibo dipped to probably his lowest level in his entire career, even thinking about when he was at Toulouse as an 18-year-old from a progressive point of view last season at West Ham. So to know that we're going to someone that didn't just continue what they were doing, but certainly at the start of the season showed a really impressive level from a progressive point of view on the left-hand side in Kilman, or in the middle in Kilman, just allowing that little bit more focus, I think will be really good for the balance of our build-up. And hopefully, like I say, improve the front line simultaneously. Defensively, I think the big thing to discuss, and if you watched England against Senegal, you will have picked it out. He's very aggressive, and that can serve him. And keyword there being can. That can serve him really, really well. Tends to want to arrive on the first touch, and because he's quick and because he's strong and because his anticipation of those situations is good. If he does arrive at the right time, he wins the ball, he wins turnovers. He did that against Saka numerous times in that game. And then he generates counterattacks. And obviously, as we know, with the players that we have at the top end of the pitch, especially if Somerville comes back and plays an important role, we have the potential to be really devastating on counterattacks still. So generating those and having someone that can single-handedly generate those is a really massive thing for us.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also, again, I think the main takeaway is that this is a really great scouting job from whoever's in the scouting department, because there's so many moments where I'm like, oh, Potter's going to love that. Potter's going to love that. In terms of the way that Potter wants to press, I think we tried to press, and at moments we pressed well at the end of last season. I think Potter will probably have finished last season feeling like perhaps the team couldn't execute the press quite in the way that he wanted, or quite as effectively as he would have liked, and therefore maybe changed some of the pressing structures, or maybe tried to adapt the team so that they didn't find themselves caught out quite so much as they did under Lopetegui, where we were trying to press, but it just didn't really make any sense because it was so clear that we couldn't do it, which I think is testament to Potter, because he's obviously putting the players in a better position. But
you can't just drop that one. Lopetegui, there's also pressing and leaving Mavropanos 1v1 against Vardy 25 yards away from the rest of your team.
Didn't know if you'd pick it up. That's your moment of the season, wasn't it? That is the lasting moment of the season that you'll take away. In 20 years' time, we'll be like, no, I don't really remember a lot of the goals that we scored. No, but I do remember Mavropanos being chilling, one man on the edge. Yeah, that was crazy. But yeah. Anyway, as I was saying, I think Diouf's anticipatory stuff will be very well received by Potter, and hopefully very well used. I think what's exciting as well, like you say, from the counter point of view, is that I don't think... Obviously, we have a lot of good counter-attacking players, but in Diouf, I think there's every chance that he just nicks the ball off the winger, runs all the way the length of the pitch and just gets to the box himself. He's got that about him. So I think that's something else that we probably missed, like in those moments a few times last season where, let's say, someone like Soler or perhaps even Wan-Bissaka or Emerson win the ball sort of in the middle of the park and they nick it, and we could go for a counter, but they don't necessarily have the requisite skills or abilities or even confidence or sort of foresight to do that. It's not hard-coded within them to do that. They're instantly looking for the combination, and then that gives the defence a slight greater chance to get back and face off against us. I think Jeff will just be like, space? Okay, I'm going in the space. Then just run, which is great. It's great. It's something that we've missed. But yeah, the more I think about the idea of Wan-Bissaka and Diouf and sort of the way we were saying that Skulls can learn a lot of Diouf, I think Diouf can learn a lot of Wan-Bissaka as well. And that's really good. It's a really nice sort of chain of, what's the word? Mentoring, I guess, which is great. And it's the right way to build a squad, frankly.
Yeah, I think lastly for me, I just want to bring it back to balance for a second as well when we're talking about counterattacks. We really thrived in these moments. I think back to maybe Kilman winning the ball, dribbling past someone and playing it across for Bowen against Crystal Palace at the beginning of the season. Think back to all of the situations where it was Declan Rice's interception on the left-hand side of the pitch, carry forward, who arrives charging forward from the right wing. Everyone's drifting across to cover the fact that Rice is the player dribbling forward. The space opens for Bowen to hit that classic shot, the one touch inside and then ping it, and he can go either side the keeper. It's very difficult for the keeper to deal with because his finishing is so good. You get the same thing from Diouf, I think, in these situations. If he pinches it in midfield, which he should be enabled to do with us playing a back three, him driving forward as a dangerous carrying dribbling threat, the defence is naturally going to move across, and that space for Bowen to just arrive in the space that he wants to be in, it will be there, and it's very easy. I think especially if it's something you're working on in the training ground, just to calm your mind down in those moments when you're arriving towards the box and look for the simplest pass. You're not looking to break anything. It's a simple sideways pass to Bowen. Sometimes it's even backwards, and you know that because he's arriving in that space, he's very likely to score. Doesn't matter really how far out it is. As if he's within 25 yards and you've given him that kind of space, he's probably going to hit the target, and more often than not, it's going to go in the back of the net. And that's a really, really, really good thing for us. We do have to do notes, and I know we're running out of time on this. We're doing a little bit of it's meant to be a mini one, but it's never a mini one when I'm hosting. And maybe actually, because we've taken so long, I am going to force us to take another break. So we're going to do a little break, and then we're going to do notes. Okay, I don't want to linger on this. I'm sorry, everyone. It's got to be done. But let's talk about some things that we're a little bit concerned about with him. Obviously, a young player, and the first one is kind of goes with the territory for any young player, really. Consistency. Yeah. I think the most obvious one for me is the first touch. I think there's so much data that stands out because of how good it is when you look at his profile, and a lot of it matches up with the eye test. But there is a flip side to that, and that is that he stands out for the wrong reasons, for miscontrols and dispossessions. And again, when you watch the video, I think this becomes probably even more clear, because I think there are moments where there potentially could have been more dispossessions had the intensity of the opposition press been a little bit better, or had someone been close to him. He'll take a bad first touch, but because he's quick and because he's playing in a league where the quality of defending is not of Premier League standard, he's able to get away with it because he can get back on the ball and it doesn't count as a dispossession, but it's still a very loose touch that better defenders might be able to punish. So that's a bit of a concern for me. Again, as you say, young player, comes with the territory. He's more than physically strong enough to hold his own in those 1v1 duels if someone does come and contest it, but obviously you'd rather just avoid that. You'd rather him trap the ball and then play the game on his terms rather than be sort of contesting a duel from the first touch. And then that sort of lack of consistency also bleeds into the crossing, which again we highlighted as a real strength. It definitely is. But there are moments where I think he arrives in situations, and because he's very good at crossing, his instinct is to go, right, I'm within however many yards of the box, I'm on the left-hand side, I should cross it because that's what I'm good at. But there are moments where he's crossing it because that's how he feels he should, but
actually, and I know it's so much easier for us to sit and say because we're watching with a bird's eye view camera and we can see that actually there's someone else that you should have passed it to in the heat of the moment. It's so much more difficult for him to spot that. But I think his crossing can sometimes look a little bit hopeful because he's not necessarily got his head up to check if someone's actually made the run into the middle of the box, and then the keeper can quite easily claim it. So he's got high volume of crosses. I think something almost 5 crosses per 90 from one player in the Czech league, which is crazy. But his crossing accuracy is one of the worst, and I think that's probably it. It's because of how high the volume is. Probably 1 or 2 of those are hopeful crosses that are just ending up being picked out by the keeper or nodded away by the centre-backs because the other players weren't even on his wavelength. So again, I think that comes with time. That also comes with gelling with the teammates. He might be blessed with a bunch of players who actually are making runs because whilst I'm talking about higher quality defenders, you're also going to be playing with higher quality attackers. And if you gel, someone like Fulkrug, and this is not to be disparaging to whoever the striker is in the Slavia team, but you would assume that someone who has made it to the Premier League is going to be making higher quality, more instinctive runs in the middle of the box. So Diouf would probably benefit from that.
I mean, it's also worth saying as well that it does go with the territory that more creative player, lower accuracy of actions. It's just, that's natural,
yeah, and
right?
If you look at his expected assist output, it's way above average. It's bordering on elite in the top 20%, top 10%. So, okay, yeah, your crossing accuracy is weak, but I can see from the quality of the chances that you're creating that actually you're good for it over the course of 90 minutes because you might make a few
the
dead
dice
ones
that many times.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I think the big thing to probably mention and the best way to sum it up is often with young players, especially with young players that back themselves and like to try things like this, there can be a bigger gap between sort of the worst action that they make in a game and the best action that they make in a game. Yeah. Whereas as players get older and a bit more senior and they know themselves better and they know what they're good at and they maybe take a few more calculated risks rather than more miscalculated risks in games, the gap between those things can lessen.
Cresswell is the perfect example of a player that's done exactly that, right? Throughout his career, he became so unbelievably dependable because he grew increasingly confident in what he was and wasn't capable of doing.
In possession, for sure. As the older he got, it just became so much more consistent, and you got very few misplaced actions with the ball as he got older, because like you say, he just was so confident in what he could do and executing what he could do, and had a calmness about him. He'd been around the block, he knew what he was doing. He had kind of had a second extra in his mind before he was physically carrying out what he was doing, whereas when you're 18, 19, 20, your first time playing in the Premier League as well, I think will exacerbate this. You have a second less in all of that stuff. So everything tends to feel a little bit more rushed, and therefore there's a lot more rushed execution and worse execution as a result, which we see in his accuracy of his crossing, sometimes the accuracy of his passing overall, the miscontrols, the dispossessions. These are all things where there's just a little bit of a sensation that maybe things are happening very fast here and physically. And that will hopefully be something that we can help him with over the years as he experiences more and more top level football. We spoke about aggression defensively being a really good thing. It can also be a really bad thing, and we know that with any player that rushes in. Mavropanos, we've seen the bad side of that so many times at West Ham. Christian Romero, we see in the Premier League, a player that when he gets it right, it's amazing. When he gets it wrong, it's kind of a disaster. If you do like to rush out defensively, you are always taking more risk defensively. The stakes are high, and if you get it wrong, it can be really catastrophic for your teammates. Big thing there, probably going to be playing in a back three, probably going to be playing at wing back, probably going to be playing with someone who's an out and out wide defender. You're trying to insulate for this in the way that you're building the out of possession approach. But it is absolutely true that that can be a problem for him, and that it can translate sometimes to lack of discipline or getting beaten and getting booked. And when we looked at yellows, didn't really see many in the Czech league, but when we started to look at his appearances in the Europa League and Champions League qualifying, we saw more, and it was notable that it was often against higher level opposition, and specifically against higher level wingers. So USG, Fenerbahce, Lille, Milan, 3 of those were bookings, 1 of those was a sending off. and those are against guys like, how was it, like Pulisic, Sam Maximan, or Brighter Say Samuel. I can't remember which one it was for Fenerbahce. Lille was Jagrova.
Yeah.
And Thiago Santos. USG was Castro Montes. So players that are dangerous dribblers, that are playing at a high level in a top team. The counterbalance to that is that, against Athletic, against Iñaki, no booking. Against England and Saka, no booking. So there's obviously some development there, but it's the case that his rate of yellows goes up from like maybe 1 in 10 to 1 in 2 when he's playing against really high level opposition. And that's something that we'll have to really be careful about when he comes into the Premier League. Obviously, we don't want a player that's going to get loads of bookings, get suspended, miss a game, go away for AFCON, miss a bunch more games, potentially get sending off another game, miss 3 games, and then you've only had him for half of the season because he's not been able to control his discipline. So that is an early concern that we should all be aware of with him.
Just hope he doesn't strike up a friendship with Alvarez too soon.
Cool. Very briefly, before we go to ET, we'll discuss this more on ET. We've got some really good stuff coming in ET. We're going to talk about rumours to other players, rumoured links to other players as well. So if you want to hear our thoughts on Tyler Morton or Harvey Elliott, patreon.com/Analytics United. It's a 7-day free trial over there. We would love to have you. Knock-on effects, Cal. Because we've signed him, what else does it change? The first one's about system. The second one is about personnel. System, I think we've described quite well. But for you, what system do you see him fitting into the best?
Well, obviously a wing-back system. I think what is clarified in my mind is, I think if we were running into the season and Emerson was likely to be the starting left wing back again, I think I'd be questioning whether that's actually going to be a 4 or a wing back anyway. But if he was going to be put in wing back, I would then start to be thinking, well, what do I want in the player ahead of him? Maybe I'd be comfortable having a more wingery profile out there, because Emerson's not really going to be your 1v1 specialist, beat a man type guy. I think what is clarified for me is that whether that's a left winger or a literal left 10, and we play with 2 10s, which I think has been going around. There's been a lot of reporting of that, I think, in the press this week, and I think that's clarified it for me. I think you've got in Diouf a 1v1 guy, a guy who can beat his man, a guy who is going to overlap every single time, a guy who's going to run up and down, a guy that can cross really well if you give him the ball in space. If you put someone that's a bit of a more reliable, as reliable creator, I suppose, to give Diouf his credit, but also someone who's a bit of a link-up guy around the box that can spot the runs from Diouf, that can spot the overlap, hit the reverse pass in behind when Diouf's carried on a run, when people have all started to look back at Bowen on the other side of the pitch. Just that sort of creative link. I think it'd be a definite for me now. I think it was probably almost a definite anyway, because I think the lineup was lacking it, but 100% I want it now. And I suppose the links to people like Harvey Elliott maybe confirm that that's something that we are looking at. And then I suppose it questions what the midfield pairing looks like, assuming we're going to run with a double pivot. I don't think that necessarily changes that much for me, though, just because it was so glaringly obvious what was missing anyway. I think you just still need that ground coverage. Maybe emphasis on someone who's comfortable to receive off Diouf and link up rather than an absolute destroyer becomes more appropriate. And then absolutely you need to sort out that centre-back situation, because if a Gerd has handed in a transfer request, does Kilman still stay in the middle? Or do you put Kilman out to the left and go for a new central centre-back in the market? Or do you put Todibo in the middle and go for a new right-sided centre-back who is potentially better in those wide duels than Todibo showed last season, and you try and cover Todibo's weaknesses a little bit that way? So many question marks there. I think we obviously need to buy a centre-back, but I think it's really important that we work out where that centre-back goes, because if you're profiling for a central centre-back, that's very different to if you're profiling for a wide centre-back. And if you're profiling for a right-sided wide centre-back, you're going to need a right footer rather than a left footer if you're keeping Kilman in the middle. So I think that's probably the biggest area of debate for me that requires the most clarification.
Last thing then, and you can't come back on this because we're out of time, and we'll discuss it more on ET. So if you want to hear more about this specific point, then join us over there. What if, and I think this is interesting with Diouf having just come in, the 3 1-4-2 system was not just out of necessity last season, but actually it was the grounding for what we wanted to do this season. There are so many examples, or increasing number of examples now, of teams trying to overload the last line, because the 4-2-4 has meant teams are pressing really, really high, jumping out to you, jumping into a man-to-man structure. It's really difficult to play out. So you either have to take massive risks close to your own goal, or you have to overload the other end. And I wonder whether, with two players now that are really good at dribbling, can carry forwards, one that can score goals and create goals, I wonder if there's a question being asked: how much is there a need for wingers here, and how much actually could we look to use Bowen inside the pitch with Füllkrug together, and try and create as much pressure up the other end as possible to buy more time for our defenders on the ball, because teams are overloaded, therefore requiring less investment in the most premium kind of number 6, the most premium kinds of centre-backs, the most premium kinds of goalkeepers, because you're systemically setting up to try and buy those guys time. Let's talk about it some more on ET. And I think you already answered the personnel question, which is it's really at centre-back. Massive impacts really on who we need at centre-back, and that will flow from a decision over where exactly. I think the most important one is where exactly Max Kilman is going to play, whether it's going to be in the middle or to the left. And it'll be really interesting to see kind of the opening friendlies to get a sense of where that might actually be.
Yep.
All right, cool. Thank you for joining us. Really excited to have this guy signed. I think he's a very good player. And if you want to see how we rated him compared to every other left back / left wing back, and I really mean every other left back / left wing back on the market this summer, then that is also on Patreon, patreon.com/Analytics United. We would love to see you there. 7-day free trial, like I say. If you wanted to leave after doing that 7-day free trial, we wouldn't mind. I think the content's good enough that you would probably want to stay. So yeah, hope to see you there. Thank you, Cal, and we'll see you next week.